apologise for coming in late, and I was having the same discussion with students at the Sussex Occupation earlier today, and my train was cancelled. I timed it perfectly, so apologies for that. But yeah, where do I want to kick off? I think the question of radical political organisation to augment and develop the remarks that other contributors have already made. I guess we need to think about it in terms of the context of what we're trying to achieve, and what our aims and goals are, and what are the kind of challenges that we confront at the moment in a lot of Western countries, and I'd be careful about generalising from that too much, but certainly in a lot of Western countries we see increasing amounts of social mobilisation and working class struggle and resistance, generally speaking, since the crisis hit, as you would expect. But they're also characterised by significant dissonance of those struggles and movements from traditional socialist organisation and parties and so on and so forth. And I don't want to exaggerate that point too much. I'm certainly not saying that groups like the SWP aren't absolutely active in these movements. They certainly are, but their politics and forms of organisation aren't able to relate to these movements, I don't think, or would argue, in a very organic way. There's not a natural coming together of, say, traditional Trotskyist ideology and the new social movements in the spirit of Occupy and other such protests. This debate, that debate and argument is one that was actually raised very, very early in the last periods of struggle that I'm kind of talking about. Some of you, I'm sure, will remember the argument between the SWP and Laurie Penny that took place in The Guardian. In that argument, there was, in a sense, I would probably personally argue that there was problems on both sides, but that was a debate that took place in the student movement in 2010, and Laurie Penny was very much arguing, look, the old left are dead, they can't relate to the new student upsurge of radicalism and the Occupy movements. Forget selling, the occupations taking place at the time. Forget selling the paper. There's new forms of organisation, and they connect to changes in human behaviour. And people like Alex Kalinikos from the SWP were arguing, well, hang on a minute, be careful of the cult of novelty, the idea that the new movements render all past experiences obsolete and so on, and we should, if you like, forget our political traditions. And I suppose I want to try and kind of develop, or we in the book that Simon and I wrote, I guess we try to develop an argument that falls somewhere between those two poles, because we agree with Laurie Penny that traditional Trotskyist Leninist forms of organisation do struggle to relate with organicity, if you like, to these rising new movements, and that's, I think, related to some of the issues that Tom has already talked about tonight. It is, I think, fundamentally the question of democracy is at the heart of that ability to connect or not connect, because these movements, whatever you say about them, are imbued very, very powerfully with a strong sense of direct democracy, participation, and so on and so forth. And it's undemocratic organisations will struggle to relate to them. I guess I fall between those two stools, if you like. But at the same time, I think we need to put this discussion in terms of the aims and goals. And we need to ask, well, what should socialist organisation be bringing to these movements? What's the task here? And I think for one of the problems we've continually confronted in the mass anti-austerity movements that isn't just a problem of the future, but affects actually the ability to fight back now, is this widespread belief that there's no alternative to capitalism, I mean, this has recently been put forward, by Mark Fisher in his book Capitalist Realism, What's the Alternative? But it's not a new idea in a sense. It was fundamental to Thatcher and Thatcherism. Once you tell people that there's no alternative, there's no other way to the changes that are ripping through your lives, Thatcher realised it directly affected the ability of people to fight back. Why do you fight back if you can't win? So if you close down all avenues for the popularisation and development of this alternative, then you directly impact on the resistance that working people will confront to this system. And so that widespread belief, I think, is very pronounced, that there's no alternative to capitalism. And it's one, I think, that in a sense it's been the time-honoured job of socialists to create that sense that there is an alternative to the system. It's to actually encourage the development of vision and imagination about the future that says, well, you don't actually have to be shackled by these by a system in which the market dominates every walk of your conceivable life, but you can actually have control over your own social reproduction, democratic control of your life to pursue your interests in every way. That's the. I mean, I know in a sense after the flurry of hands went up about revolutionary. Have you ever been in a revolutionary organisation? I know that these aren't new arguments in a sense, but I think once we need to find a way of reassessing our own ways of organising and developing our existing organisations in a way that we can put forward these arguments with greater coherence and organicity. So I will, I would just, in a sense, I'm just echoing in my wrapping up because I want to hear what you've got to say. I'm echoing like a lot of the remarks that Tom concluded in. I think that we need, political organisation. There's a case for it. The MST in Brazil, extremely radical, powerful social movement organisation. But of course, they confront actually, inevitably, as a sectional movement that is developing peasant mobilisation and struggle. They confront the question of power. They confront the question of how do you link up with urban-based mobilisations? How do you develop that? I think political organisation is the answer there. It's political organisation that has to come out of those movements and be organically connected to it. Developing those forms of organisation today has to be recognising that plurality and the possibility of disagreeing, with one another is elementary to the type of organisations that we want to build. That we create forums where, bit like this one, but on a much wider scale, where people can come together and discuss, well, how do we get rid of capitalism? What's the strategy here? And if you imagine what a political party on a large scale today that was pushing towards an alternative, discussing an alternative, it wouldn't be a type of political party where the leadership take a decision and it just emanates downwards, but it will be creating forums in working class communities where you encourage people to discuss politics, where the development of the politics of the organisation comes upwards from the base to the top, and you aspire proactively for unity in action, proactively inspire to achieve unity in action, to achieve political clarity. But sometimes you recognise that won't always be possible, and you might have to disagree. You might not always be able to have that unity in action, but you still remain part of the same organisation. And if you think about, the classical Marxist thing of fusing, the ideas of socialism and alternative with existing mass workers' organisations, isn't that the only conceivable way in which this process could actually be real and could actually happen? It would have to be a process where lots of ideas are coming in and flowing in and connecting with it, and where therefore the socialist consciousness that is created, is multi-dimensional. It's creative. It's exciting because it has that participation. I think I'll leave it there because I need to finish anyway, and I want to hear what you've got to say. But I will say, that might sound quite abstract, and then there's a question of what do we practically do now? And I appreciate that argument is quite abstract. It is quite hypothetical almost. But in a sense, we need to clarify in our own minds as left-wing people, what we think the actual process will be for the development of mass socialist communistic consciousness, and re-articulate what the kinds of organisations that we're building in the first place, rather than having a myriad of different groups that are inevitably competing with one another because they all, as Thomas says, claim a monopoly on truth. We need more unity, more organisational forums where these discussions are had out in a united way, and we develop that slowly but surely over time, and we can gradually get to where we need to be.